In this video, we're going to go over the rules for Sittuyin, or Burmese chess. The game is very similar to Makrok and Okchang, all being Southeast Asian variants. So if you know how to play those games, all the pieces are the same. For the people who only know how to play standard or orthodox chess, this game should also be familiar, as almost all the pieces except for two are the same. So let's go over the rules. For starters, let's have a look at the board. And there are a few things you might notice. One, the board is not checkered, and it has these two diagonal lines that go right through the middle of the board. And the next thing you might see is that we only have 8 pieces on each side. We have a red side and a green side. Red is the side that moves first, followed by green. And these 8 pieces are the pawns. So where are the rest of the pieces? Well, the rest of the pieces start off the board, and then they're gradually placed on the board at the very beginning of the game, called the placement phase. So there are a few ways to do the placement phase. The official rules state that red starts by placing all his pieces anywhere behind the pawns, so basically any of these squares, and he just places them one by one until the remaining 8 pieces are out on the board, and then green gets to place their remaining 8 pieces. Now for competition rules, when you play this game over the board in real life, a curtain is placed through the middle, and the curtain basically blocks division between the two players, and they both individually place their pieces. And once they're done, the curtain's revealed and the game begins, starting with red. Now the way it's actually implemented in Pi Chess is different, and that's mainly because at this time the engine that we use does not support the other two methods. And so in Pi Chess we place pieces in alternating order, like so. Now the goal of the game is the same as in chess or Makrok, or basically most chess variants out there, and the goal is to checkmate the king. This is the red king, this is the green king. It's this ornate guy sitting on a throne, basically. And you checkmate him when a piece is attacking him and he has nowhere else to go. There are many other ways to draw the game, which I'll describe at the end of the video, but for now we're going to discuss the movements of the pieces. So first I'm going to start with the pawn, also known as the feudal lord. And these are the guys you start with at the very beginning, and you can't place them. They're automatically set in these 8 squares. And the pawn is basically the same as in chess or Makrok. They can move forward without capturing, or they can capture pieces that are diagonally forwards. The pawn is the only piece that can promote in the game, and I'll go over that in detail later. The pawn promotes to the general, which moves 1 square diagonally in any direction, and the general replaces the queen. Next we have the king, and the king is straightforward. It moves 1 square in any direction, just like most kings do. We'll go over another familiar piece, the chariot, which is essentially the rook, and it moves any number of squares orthogonally in any direction. The next one should also be familiar to many people, and this is called the horse, and it's essentially the knight. And if you're not familiar with the knight, basically it moves 2 squares in a direction and then 1 square to the side, so reaching all these 8 points. And like the knight in chess, it could jump to these points, so it can't be blocked by any piece. Finally, we have the elephant, which is not really at all like the bishop from chess. The elephant moves 1 square diagonally in any direction, just like the general, as well as 1 square forwards. So some of you chess players may have noticed, well, if there's no queen, that makes the piece values a little bit different, where your chariot is your most powerful piece. So try not to lose these. Finally, let's talk about pawn promotion. So promotion is very different in Sittuyin, and promotion is based off these diagonal lines on the board. So you can only promote once you reach these squares on the enemy side of the board that have these diagonal lines. So from red's perspective, it's these 8 squares, and I'm just going to circle them too as well. And on top of that, they can skip promotion and do it further down, so I'm going to highlight these as well. So basically, this is the promotion zone. Now the first requirement for promotion is that you can't have any generals on the board. So if this guy is here, this pawn cannot promote even if it reaches this rank. So that's something very important to keep in mind. But for the rest of these rules, let's remove the general and say that there are no more generals on the board. So one big difference between Sittuyin and many other chess variants is that the promotion does not happen immediately upon reaching the promotion zone. It happens on the following turn. So the moment this pawn reaches this square, nothing happens. It's at the turn after. So at the turn after, this pawn can move like a general, and when it does, it promotes into a general. So it could promote to a general here, as well as those other diagonals that I had mentioned before. On top of that, you can also promote in place. So in Pi Chess, you can do this by double-clicking or holding down Control on your keyboard and left-clicking, and that'll turn it into a general as well. Okay, but there's one more rule to keep in mind. When you promote, 1, you cannot promote by taking a piece, and 2, you cannot promote and threaten a piece by doing so. So in this case, let's say this enemy pawn is over here. These two spots are not valid spots for promotion because if you were to create a general in these spots, this general would threaten that piece, and therefore this is not a legal spot. So in this current position, the only place to promote is this way. So that basically summarizes piece movements and as well as promotion rules. Finally, let's talk about ways the game can draw. First, the most obvious way the game can draw is if you just simply can't do anything to checkmate the other player. So in this situation, both players are down to 1 king. There's no possible way to checkmate for either side, and so the game's a draw. This is called a dead position. The next way is a stalemate. And so let's say we have something like this, where green's king can't move anywhere because all these squares are covered by red pieces. And because green has no more legal moves, this is stalemate. Just like in international chess, it's a draw. Also similar to international chess is repetition. So repetition is when the same position happens at least 3 times. The game is automatically called a draw. So let's look at this position where green has a king and red has a king and elephant. And they're just going to go back and forth for no reason. So they just repeated this position a second time. And a third time. And the game basically ends as a draw. Well, let's say they just continue to run around in circles for no reason. Well, if they keep doing this and make at least 50 consecutive moves without moving any pawn or having any captures, then the game is also over by the 50 move rule. Then finally, let's talk about the counting rule, and this one should be familiar to someone who knows the rules for Makruk or Okjatrang. The counting rule happens when a player is left with only just their king, no other pieces. Once this has happened, they pay attention to what pieces the other side has. So let's look at the board here. Green has only his king left, and red has a bunch of different pieces. Counting rules happen once no more pawns are in play. So red still has a pawn. Let's say red loses this pawn or he promotes it to a general. Now there are no more pawns. And at this point, red has a certain number of moves to checkmate the opponent before the game is considered a draw. And the number of moves he has depends on the types of pieces he has left. So if he has at least 1 rook or chariot, he has up to 16 moves to checkmate green before the game is declared a draw. Now let's get rid of this chariot over here. Now the next rule is, if there's at least 1 bishop, red now has 44 moves to checkmate green before it's declared a draw. And then finally, if there's at least 1 horse, then it takes 64 moves before a draw is automatically declared. So those are all the rules for Sittuyin. Sittuyin is a game that is not quite as popular as its neighboring games, Makruk and even Okjatrang. But dedicated players in Myanmar are trying to bring this game back by making more sets available to players and having more organized tournaments. And if you're more interested in learning the game, then please check it out at Chess. And of course, if you'd like to see more videos like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe.